Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We are in the book of Exodus, chapter 13, verses 1 through 16. And this passage links together the dedication of the firstborn along with the commemoration of this holy meal that really identifies who God's people are. So let's talk about the firstborn. Remember that the Egyptians wanted to destroy the Hebrew male babies, right? And it is the plague that destroys the firstborn, not just of Egypt, but it was a threat also against Israel. But God interceded. He covered them with his blood, and so he has redeemed them. And so he says, the firstborn of both of your family and of your flocks belong to me. The way to think about this is like your first fruits. Right off the top, the tithe, you're to give 10% off the top. Now, it doesn't mean that only the 10% is consecrated. Really, when that 10% is consecrated, the other 90% as well. And that's the same as the firstborn is dedicated and consecrated to the Lord. So is the rest of the family. And the first fruits aren't necessarily the best fruits. Actually, in farming, you'll find that sometimes the first fruits are not that great. But the point is, it comes off the top. The first obligation is to your relationship with the Lord. And why? Because Israel itself, and back in Exodus chapter 4, verse 22, it said, Israel is my firstborn son. And that's why it also talks about commemorating this day, because I have made you my people, right? You are to commemorate this day because this is the day that I brought you out of that land of slavery. And I brought you out of that in order to bring you into the land of promise, the land of living relying upon the Lord, the land of milk and honey. And so every year you are to repeat this commemoration because it brings them together with the Lord and with each other. And so it's constituting them as God's people. And as it talks about having the feast of unleavened bread for the next 7 days, it's all about how the Lord, that whole focus is about how the Lord is feeding them and nurturing them in the faith. Now he goes on in verse 8, in verse 14, what do you do when your son asks you, what does this mean? Why are we doing this? And it's all about God's wonderful rescue because he says, what? Because this is what the Lord did for me. It's not just what God did in the past for those other people, but this is my own personal story. And it's about that appropriation of that salvation story for my life. Just as today we talk about Jesus's work on the cross and his resurrection, it is also for me. And so he's telling them that this story, this testimony, is to be a sign that guides with their hands and their foreheads, what they think, so that they talk about what it means to be God's people. And that parents have the responsibility of training their children in the faith, of giving them spiritual teaching. And if you're going to make decisions about what your kids eat, dress, watch, whose friends they are, etc., you first and foremost have this responsibility to commend them to the Lord so that they have the promise. They have God's promises, the promises of eternity. And he says, after the Lord brings you out of slavery and gives you this promised land, you are to give this testimony that each parent has a responsibility to share what the Lord has done for them in order to lead their children to also claim this story as the story that creates their identity of who they are. Because you're either going to be a slave of this world or a child of God. Well, hey, thanks, friend. Enjoy reading chapter 13. If you have any comments, please share those with me on whatever platform you're enjoying this. Have a blessed day.